Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a fabulous show for you tonight, including new details out on the January storm that walloped a lot of you and turned out the lights for thousands more. But first, let's talk about Portland General Electric in a broader sense, because they want another rate hike. It's going to affect hundreds of thousands of you, and that makes it our big story tonight. Now, just to be clear, Portland General Electric already got a rate hike of 18% that you saw on your January bill, and now they want more. In this new filing, PGE wants to increase rates next year by an average of 7.3% above where they are now. The company argues that it deserves to make a 9.75% return, and that without the increase, that won't happen. It also points out that it's investing in 2 huge battery storage operations in the Portland area that will store up to 4 hours of electricity to power as many as 260,000 homes. It also wants a new mechanism to ask for more frequent rate hikes to pay for safety and resiliency work on its system. I wanted to talk with PGE's CEO, Maria Pope, about that, but was told she was not available today. Bob Jenks, though, from the Citizens Utility Board, a watchdog group representing consumers, was available. He does not think much of this new PGE rate request.
But the most incredible thing is they want a new rate-making mechanism that allows them to raise rates every January for billions of dollars of capital investment, with a very limited review by the PUC and stakeholders like CUB, without any ability to look at profits and see where shareholders should help pay for this.
So you can tell which way he's going, and you can see the watchdog going to keep challenging that. Another argument PGE makes for higher rates is the impact of climate change and clean energy. And during testimony submitted to the Public Utility Board, Pope said there are more days where electricity is needed now to cool our homes and businesses, and fewer days where it's needed to heat the place up. And that is leading to more demand, she said. Before 2022, PGE's peak load record held for nearly 25 years. Now we are seeing new records set almost annually, with a new winter peak load record set in December of 2022 and a new summer and all-time system peak set in June of 21 and then again in August of 23. So the climate is fluctuating more wildly than we've seen before, and it's happening at the same time that coal plants are being shut down across the West. Coal plants are dirty and they're bad for the environment when it comes to producing electricity, but they are very dependable when they're up and running. So as more shut down, there's less dependable electricity during storms. Pope said about that, as utilities throughout our region embrace new clean energy technologies and beneficial electrification to reduce carbon emissions, regional capacity supply has tightened and frequently reaches critical levels during peak events, and energy prices regularly rise to unprecedented levels during high demand periods. Translate that, supplies get tight, prices hit the roof. As an example, she pointed to our most recent January storm, which she said was the coldest in 30 years. It was a regional weather event as well, and it stressed the system big time. Pope said the regional weather event created extremely high and volatile wholesale energy market prices. She gave us examples. One market charged $1,000 per megawatt hour, and the massive California independent system operator, well, they were charging $2,000 per megawatt hour during the big storm. She also said that regional electric supplies were stretched to deficit levels, so they were kind of in danger of running out. There was not enough, and several other utilities had to actually declare what's known as an energy emergency alert. I'm still trying to find out specifically which ones did that. Not PGE, though. Speaking of that storm, we've been watching for a report PGE had to file that broke down their response to the January storm, and guess what? It's out today. They report that it took down 850 distribution power lines. That is the storm that came in. And over the course of the week, it knocked out power for roughly 440,000 customers. That's a new number that I'd not heard. Pacific Power customers were hit as well, 146,000 during that January storm. And by the way, we do see you, Southern Oregon. Pacific Power is now dealing with new outages down there around the Medford area because of the snowstorms there that started on Friday. But we're going to stay focused on PGE in the Portland area for this. This is the formal report that's required by the Public Utilities Commission. The utility reports that as the storm arrived, it carried high winds that knocked out power to 270,000 customers relatively quickly. The storm lasted a week from January 13th through the 20th, with waves of wind and snow and ice hitting the area. PGE says 109,000 customers had the power go out multiple times. Here's a look at the outages throughout the week and how many customers were without power each day. It was a bunch right away, and then it surged again when the third wave of the storm hit about January 19th. They also offer up this map, which shows what we suspected all along. The hardest hit area in the yellow, orange, and red there was in Beaverton, Tigard, and Lake Oswego. Also now, I know a lot of you were frustrated by the poor communication from the company. They addressed that briefly in their storm report, just saying, you know what, it was hard to get places, so it was really hard to give you estimates on when the power would be back on. That was something else we wanted to discuss with the CEO, Maria Pope, today, but again, we were told she was not available. So, what's going through your mind after hearing about yet another PGE rate increase, along with the follow-ups on the big January storm? Let us know, will you? Send us an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And while we're on the topic of utilities in our area, big recent news regarding PacifiCorp. The U.S. government is threatening to sue the company over the 2020 wildfires in Oregon and Northern California. How much money are we talking about? How about $1 billion? Yeah, with a B. The potential lawsuits were noted in an annual report filed by PacifiCorp's parent company, Berkshire Hathaway Energy. That's owned by Warren Buffett. He runs Berkshire Hathaway. This is a new liability that comes after the utility already agreed to pay hundreds of millions in lawsuits related to the fires we've covered extensively here on The Story. The company is now trying to negotiate a settlement to avoid this new litigation. Here's what we know. The feds want $625 million in firefighting and cleanup costs related to the Archie Creek and Susan Creek fires. That's along with the $109 million that the Oregon Department of Justice wants in damages related to those fires. And the U.S. Forest Service has asked the utility to pay $356 million for the Slater fire, which started in California but crossed the Oregon border. Those are all federal agency costs, and they want those recouped. The fires were among the worst in Oregon history, killing 9 people and destroying about 5,000 homes and structures. The lawsuits that we've seen so far in Oregon revolve around the accusation that PacifiCorp negligently failed to shut off power to its customers during the Labor Day windstorm, despite warnings from state and fire officials, and that their energized lines started fires when they came down. So we'll see if settlement is reached or if these new lawsuits move forward. Now, if you are a Pacific Power customer, you're probably wondering if these lawsuits will affect your rates in the future. The answer is, yeah, there's a chance. The company is not unilaterally allowed to raise rates to pay for things like litigation losses, but a few months ago, the utility filed something to open the door to that possibility. It was immediately met with a challenge from an advocacy group and ratepayers alike, so time will tell. But Buffett's Berkshire estimates that its utilities face at least $8 billion in claims across wildfire lawsuits filed in Oregon and California. And that number really could be low because damages in some cases could go up, and some lawsuits don't list a dollar amount. And with all that on the table and regulatory changes in the West, even Warren Buffett questions the future investments here for things like power plants or transmission lines. He actually wrote, "It will be many years until we know the final tally from Berkshire Hathaway Energy forest fire losses and can intelligently make decisions about the desirability of future investments in vulnerable Western states. It remains to be seen whether the regulatory environment will change elsewhere." He said in extreme cases, some private utilities could face bankruptcy, and private investors may not be willing to take risks on utility companies, meaning the country actually could eventually consider turning to a public power system. That'd be interesting. Well, it's been just over 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, and shortly after it happened in February of 2022, many states, including Oregon, vowed to get rid of any investments with Russia. But as investigative reporter Kyle Leboshi found out, so far, Oregon has not been able to hold up its promise.
Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Oregon State Treasurer made headlines, vowing to cut financial ties with Russia. But 2 years later, KGW found those promises have been unfulfilled. The state is still sitting on millions of dollars in Russian investments while the war rages on. And in late February, President Biden called for new sanctions on Russia after the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Siberian prison. Russian investments represent just a tiny fraction of Oregon's $93 billion pension fund portfolio for government retirees. Even so, Oregon's treasurer, Tobias Reed, directed staff to divest from Russia. The situation in Ukraine is serious, tragic, and growing more desperate by the day, Reed said in March of 2022. Oregon, along with many other states that vowed to sell off Russian investments, found it wasn't so easy. Russia's economy had been cut off from the rest of the world, making it nearly impossible to divest, and the value of those assets plummeted. Oregon's Russian investments were valued at roughly $137 million in March of 2022 and $67 million a month later. By June of 2023, the state's Russian assets had shrunk to $49 million. Tom Sanzillo of the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis is a former first deputy comptroller for the state of New York.
As a former fund administrator, there's no fund in the country that can move with the lightning speed of the news cycle. And so it's a little unrealistic in that respect.
According to a spokesperson for the state treasurer, fund managers continue to attempt to sell shares and not purchase any new shares of Russian assets. But no benchmarks or deadlines have been set for the state to divest. Treasurer Reed declined multiple requests for an interview. I
would say I'm disappointed that I see very few reports coming out as follow-up, and there should be. It's not a proper administrative response to say nothing.
The situation with Russia highlights long-standing questions about the risk of investing with certain countries and the state's role in socially responsible investing. In the mid-1980s, the legislature required the state to divest in companies doing business in South Africa due to apartheid. In 2005, it took similar action when Sudan was accused of atrocities in its fight against rebels in Darfur. Currently, the Oregon legislature is considering a bill that would divest from coal, but not oil and gas. The goal is to reduce greenhouse gases responsible for climate change. Washington state took a similar position on Russia. It too planned to get rid of roughly $100 million in assets linked to Russia. 2 years later, the state admits it's still holding Russian investments, but wouldn't provide their estimated value. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
Thanks, Kyle. Now to an update on Oregon's bill to recriminalize hard drugs, undoing much of Measure 110. Friday, we showed you how HB 4002 was fast-tracked through the Senate after previously passing the House. And that means it is on its way to Governor Kotek's desk. When we asked her office about the bill today, they told us the governor will review it, but has 30 days to sign it. Our latest check-in on Oregon's legislative website shows it has not arrived at her office yet. In my opinion, though, it's already a done deal. It's only a matter of time before she signs it. It would be a monumental rebuke to the legislature and many Oregonians who are demanding change when it comes to drugs if the governor chooses to veto the bill. But we'll let you know when she makes a decision. The bill to put Oregon on permanent standard time took a step forward today, passing the Senate on a 16-14 vote, pretty narrow. That would mean no springing forward or falling back each year. You may recall this is the second time that the Senate has voted on the bill. The first time failed. It was a 15-15 vote. But then the bill was changed in order to add a trigger. So instead of taking effect right away, the bill is eventually signed into law. If it is, Oregon will only change to permanent standard time if Washington and California make the change and go along as well. So all three states would change together instead of piecemeal. It now heads to the House for consideration, and it had its first reading there today. Even if the House passes it and the governor signs it, which is not a guarantee, we would still be waiting on Washington and California to do anything. Washington's bill died during its session this year, but they have to, so they'll discuss it in 2025 if they want to do anything with it. And California, well, they have a bill in a Senate committee right now. We do expect an update on its future in the coming weeks. Also in the legislature, Oregon's bill that would ban book bans. After the break, we'll take a look at where it stands and how one state office is weighing in on how local school districts handled a big challenge on school library books. That's when the story returns. Oregon's ban on book bans is one step closer to becoming law. The bill would restrict school boards from banning books in school libraries if the ban is done in a discriminatory way. It's Senate Bill 1583, and it passed the Senate last week. It's sponsored by Oregon Senator Lou Frederick, who represents North and Northeast Portland.
I think it will stop the effort to try to discriminate against groups of people. And right now we see that as part of a national effort and a local effort and a state effort too, to try to discriminate against different groups of people and using the books as a way to do that. This, I think, basically takes that particular approach out of the mix and lets us read, let kids find out about reading. It does not force anybody to read anything. It says these things are available.
An overwhelming majority of the books challenged in both school and public libraries are either by or about people of color or LGBTQ people. That's the trend both in Oregon and nationally. Senator Frederick says this bill only targets those discriminatory book challenges. Books could still be removed from libraries if they are not age appropriate. But opponents of the bill say it takes away the power of locally elected school boards.
I don't think that it's this body's responsibility to tell a school district what they can and cannot make available. I want to be clear that books still exist whether or not it's in their library. We're not banning books, we're not burning books, we're just saying that this probably isn't something that a child should be encouraged to read.
A similar bill has passed both chambers in Washington, and it's on its way to the governor's desk there. In both states, parents could still contact their kid's school and request that their child not have any access to any books they find objectionable, and kids wouldn't be forced to read anything. They would have the option to check them out of the school library, though. The Oregon Intellectual Freedom Committee testified on behalf of the Oregon bill. They're a group through the Oregon Library Association that helps work on policies that support libraries. They've been tracking book challenges in Oregon for more than 30 years, and they say last year had the highest number of challenges ever. This week, they released a report looking at a book challenge we covered last year in the Canby School District. 2 community members requested that 37 different books be removed from the libraries, saying they contained sexual content, violence, and drugs. 13 of those include LGBTQ or racial themes. The school district pulled all of the books off the school shelves for the months through the end of the school year while they were reviewed. Dozens of students and members of the community protested, demanding that they return. In the end, the district only removed one book, Lolita. Others were returned in the summer, but some had age restrictions for kids to check them out. The Intellectual Freedom Committee says Canby went about the book challenge in the wrong way, especially because they removed the books before they were reviewed.
When a title is being removed, even for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 weeks or however long that title is not available or accessible to the community that it was previously available, specifically because of the content within that title, that is considered censorship for the amount of time that it is not on the shelf. So for this particular scenario with the 35 or 37 titles to be removed from circulation during the review process, that would be considered to us censorship.
Guidance from the Oregon Department of Education says that challenged books should stay in circulation until the review process is complete. They also say the district was not transparent in their review process and did not offer a way for their final decision on the books to be appealed.
The decision to remove these titles from circulation was, from our understanding, very quick. So 2 parents went to a board meeting. They were pretty adamant in their concern. And almost immediately after that, the titles were removed from circulation, again, under the umbrella that they would be reviewed. However, we also have gone back and watched those board meetings and saw an incredibly vocal community that wanted those titles to stay on the shelf. And so this idea that, well, they're speaking on behalf of the community. Well, the community has been pretty clear that they didn't want this to happen. And yet it was at the will of 2 parents that it did. And so I would ask the Canby School District to really look at the number of individuals that are saying we don't want restricted access to information. We want our children to be able to learn openly. And if there are 2 parents that have concerns, ask those 2 parents to set guidelines for their own particular family unit and not allow those 2 parents to dictate the entire school district.
The committee is asking the Canby district to remove age restrictions on all the books and to return Lolita to the libraries. And they want Canby to update their book review policies. Stay with us. We'll be digging for old right after this. Well, the KGW food drive is underway. Our goal this year is to collect enough donations to provide more than 1 million meals for local families in need. You can help right now by giving online at kgw.com/food drive. A $10 donation can provide as many as 30 meals. And all this week, Rivermark Credit Union will match the first $5,000 donated. We also want to thank local Toyota dealers, Pacific Office Automation, and Safeway for helping us make this year's drive a success. Again, head over to kgw.com/food drive. And it's time for tonight's Digging for Old. We thought we'd take a look at the calendar to see if there were any notable birthdays this time of year. Man, did we ever find one. It belongs to a giant of the tennis world, someone that you may not know of, who was born right here in Oregon. It's Margaret Osborne DuPont, born on today's date back on March 4th, 1918 in Joseph, Oregon, out in Wallowa County. She started playing tennis at the age of 9 when her family moved to Spokane, and then 2 years later the family settled in San Francisco, where she found herself on the Golden Gates public tennis courts, a block from home. She won, get this, 37 Grand Slam titles, 31 of those in doubles play. She was perhaps the most dominant double players of her era. She was ranked #1 in the world among women from 1947 through 1950. And it was during that time that she married William DuPont, heir to the famous chemical company Fortune. Her last Grand Slam title would come in Wimbledon at 1962 at the age of 44. Margaret Osborne DuPont died in 2012 at her home in El Paso, Texas. She was 94 years old. Wow, what a life. What an athlete. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. A quick programming note, we will not have a show for you on Thursday this week because of President Biden's State of the Union address, but we'll be back on Friday. In the meantime, good night, and the good stuff is coming your way next. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.